So let me start out by asking you guys, did you always want to write a book, or was this kind of a new idea? Did it just suddenly hit you a few years ago? Did you want to do a book, or did you want to do a book since you were in elementary school?
Well, I'll start. Yes, always.
Always.
Always and forever, yes.
I don't think I had that long term, but I always respected people who did write books. And then there was an opportunity to get my opinion out there on something I thought was important. So, books are good. Joe helped.
Now, John, you wrote a textbook.
Yeah, I've written a few books along the way. So, writing wasn't new to me, but writing something outside the technical space was a different experience for me.
Did any of you ever start another book and give up on it? Mike, you?
Well, I started writing in college, and then I got into Silicon Valley. 30 years passed, and then decided to go back to it. So from my point of view, it's a creative effort. And trying to do a fictional book versus a business book is a very different matter, really. In my kind of weird way of thinking about things, I wanted to find a way to communicate what's going on in the world in a way that people can understand it. And we live in a period where we're probably having a greater explosion of innovation and R&D than the history of computing. It's just amazing what's going on right now. But our ability to comprehend what's happening is at a very low level. So there's this enormous gap between the explosion of technology and human ability to deal with it. So I wanted to translate that into people's lives because that's social impact. You know, it's not just about the technology, it's about what it does to change our lives and how we think about things.
Now, John, there's a big difference between this kind of publishing and academic publishing.
Yeah, I think you're right, Mike. I mean, there's a whole different audience you're trying to reach, which isn't the traditional academic or even practicing engineering audience. And that requires a different approach. And it's also a harder thing to shape. If you're writing a technical engineering book, you kind of know what the outline looks like. It's much harder to write a book that talks about experience and leadership and what the valley's like and how things are evolving. And that's the challenge, I think, in any of these books. And it's an easy book not to finish because you might get started and just stall.
I think my experience was that there were so many other things going on. So many things that I was working on. So many things that I was working on with the multiple roles that I had. And I think the question of writing a book wasn't one of, oh, yes, I think I'd like to do it. It's, when would I ever get the time to write a book? And I think that was the biggest challenge for me.
I think the hardest thing. I think the hardest thing about writing a book is, especially a business book. This is not a fiction book, but it's finding examples for everything because people don't understand things unless there are a million examples. And so, gosh, if you know, Lauren and Joe and Atito are constantly asking me, "What's the example? What's the example?" And I want to, you know, punch them in the face after the ninth time. But that's what makes a business book interesting. Example.
I'm familiar with. What was really interesting was the process. I learned so much because Joe and Mike and Atia kept asking me, kept saying, okay, well, why this? What about this? And what was interesting to me was that process was a conversation. It was multiple conversations, and that was the nexus of the book. Those conversations. Well, that's what I normally do, and so that made it easy to get that book, to get the process out, and get it out of the way, so that it didn't become an impediment. And the other thing was that I actually had meeting times with you guys. It helped.
Yeah, I had the same experience. I had never written a book, but I had led teams that made software, so I kind of flipped it into that, and the project management and such, the fact that there was a time and a delivery and a date, and you know, it just kind of felt like doing another project.
Any sense of any mistakes, you guys, looking back?
Very helpful because when I first came in and met with you guys, I was going to boil the ocean, right? We were going to write about the Chinese problem, and you said, no, we're going to pick one of these things, and that even though we got a missed start, that still was very focused.
Anybody else? Mistakes?
For me, God, it's hard to say one. There's so many. I think for me, what I realized was that I wouldn't change the process, but what I think I should point out is that mistakes are part of that process, at least for me. I'm used to iterating. I'm used to going and trying to figure stuff out and saying, this didn't work, let's do this. The mistakes that we went through, trying to get me to write, for instance, or just to give you an outline instead of having a conversation and doing it that way, that was a mistake, but I needed to learn from that mistake. And so I'm glad those mistakes happened. I know now that those are processes, those are things that I needed to learn, but that was kind of part of the process. What was useful for me was you guys brought the process to something to me that to me was just kind of unstructured time that I tried to go in front of the laptop and type stuff.
Was the process faster or slower than you anticipated? Did the book take longer than you thought, or shorter?
Way longer.
Oh yeah, you're way longer. You're in the outlier. Yeah.
I'm on the shorter side. It took a lot less time. The first few months were a little rough, but after that we kind of came to a way of working together, and it was much faster than I ever anticipated, actually. And I write every day. I probably write 4 or 5 hours a day for clients. That has nothing to do with myself and my books. So by the end of the day, I was so exhausted from writing stuff for clients, I didn't have the patience to write my own stuff. And this whole process and the deadlines that are part of it kind of force you to get into a schedule, and it's great.
You guys, faster, slower?
Shorter, faster, and I think, so the other person was the unsung hero for my book was Cheryl, who did our editing, who did a spectacular job. And when I sent it into the publisher, they said, well, you know, we get a lot of books, but this is one of the best. It's in the best shape of the many books we've gotten. So that was great. Now, if you've seen the way academics tend to write, you might understand that better.
Think it easier as it went along? Did you guys find it was a learning process where you, by the time you finished the book, you knew how to do a book, you could do it again?
I knew how to get Malone to do what he needed to do.
I think I agree with that. I think I learned that writing a book is much easier to do with a group of people than it is to do by yourself.
Yeah, it's definitely a team sport. It's
Absolutely.
I can't imagine sitting down and doing that by myself.
Right in my world. Did you guys ever want to give up? At some point? Yeah?
Constantly. But I have to add one other thing that the thing that was really interesting to me was not just the line editing. It was the idea.
You don't want, okay, look, don't compute what your hourly wage is when you write a book. Compute your impact on the world. That's what you want to look at.
It was amazing for me. I dedicated the book to my parents, who, for them, the holiest grail of every holy grail was to write a book. And they had always wanted to write a book, and they never had. They were big readers. And so when it came out, they had long passed. But when it came out, it was just amazing. And then I got to see it in a Barnes & Noble store. That was the most amazing.
Very proud, very memorable moment. Yeah, it was great.
So would you do it again? Would you go down this path in a book?
Absolutely.
No.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely, if the team would do it again with me.
Only if we finish the first one.
Yeah, you got finished the first. Good, 2 inches away.
Mike, you're up?
Yeah, absolutely.
But the reality is, just about every writer we've worked with, they come with, in the grip of a passion. They really want to explain to the world what they've discovered, what they've found, and they want to get it out there in a cogent way. And that's what, I mean, you're going to put a lot of hours into doing a book, so you better really care about it to be good. But they do, they really care.